your host, Sami Kinnison, here with Angela Belford. And today we are celebrating the new year. Woo!
Woo!
Yeah. And if you're listening to this in the future and you're like, oh, I thought they were just in the middle of summer, I'm kind of confused that they are talking about the new year. Bingo, you're right on the money. It is not the new year calendar wise, but it is right about to be the start of the new year, the new school year. And we actually wanted to take a moment to talk about like New Year's resolutions and goal setting and things like that. And frankly, we think that the best time of the year to set your goals is actually like August, September, not January. So, Angela, this for you started kind of a while ago. Tell me
It
more
did.
about why this time period of the year, August, September.
Yeah, well, and longtime listeners are like, gosh, you can talk about it again. Yes, because we need to hear things more than one time. So we don't take a bath one time. We
Well,
talk about
because last year you probably heard it and you rolled your eyes. And now this year you're like, oh, I do know the thing. And maybe you'll roll your eyes a little bit less. And by next year, you'll be like, ooh, it's almost time to set my goals. You'll start
and
to get that way.
marketing says you need to hear something about 11 times before it actually and you do something about it. And that statistic was taught to me way before social media. So it's probably way more times than that now, but we're going to talk about it. I would like to say that also, yes, September, October, August, September is a great time. And I recently, on July 1st, woke up and went, today is the first day of the second half of the year. And I was so motivated that day because I was like, yes, it's time I could start again. So, one thing is you can start any day. You can pick any day. You can decide on my birthday every year, that's going to be my New Year's resolutions, and I'm going to set my goals for that. I'm going to do it at the beginning of a quarter. But I will tell you that human nature is that an object in motion stays in motion. And most of us went to school, back to school in late August, 1st of September, for 12 to 13 to 14 years, those people that were in Canada didn't get grade 13.
I thought you were accusing people of being held back or something like
No, no, no,
that.
no. My husband
You're
had to
like,
go to grade 13. And then if you went on to postgraduate, and you went to college, you might have added another 4 years. And then if you have children, that then for me, I did my own 18 years and then
well, because
or
that's
my own
funny.
12 or 13 years. And then I did now my own children's 12 or 13 years overlap for like, it felt like 35 years.
Yeah, you've
Um,
really never had a break in the school year because
I
you guys
didn't.
had children before you left college. And then, I mean, maybe a teensy
We had a
break when I
teeny
was in
break.
like daycare.
We did have a little bit of a break because Barry graduated in the summer of 98. Josh was a year old and you didn't start school. We got 1 year break. You started kindergarten in the fall of 1999. So that's really
Right.
funny. He finished in the summer and then you started 1 year later in the fall. That was our big break between having, our own
Having
16-year
some part of your
experience,
life tied to the school
the
year
school year.
schedule.
Yes, and so when you are that school year, we also we all love getting new school supplies. I know so many people that are like, "Ooh, office supplies." And I don't even like paper and I love office supplies, right? But that whole idea of starting something new, um it's a season change. We like lots of us like fall, but that our body starts in a different motion, and that is a great time to be able to begin a new trajectory.
I love it. I think that I recently have been just sort of like reconnected with my goals and things like that. And actually, one of the things that's tricky, part of how I got reconnected with my goals is because I had this moment where I had the thought that I said, I just need somebody to tell me that I can't do this thing so I can go get it done. And I was like, whoa, what was that thought? That was fascinating. Um, and I kind of had a little bit of a funk for a week because I was like, well, crap. I've been in this new space, this lighter, less baggage, emotional space, probably for
So what does that look
the
like? So you're not
well,
proving yourself?
that's what I'm saying. So like it's the lightest space I've been at emotionally in my life. And for the first time, I'm not trying to do things to prove somebody wrong. I'm not trying to do things to prove that I'm enough. I'm not trying to do things because everything has to be done perfect or it's wrong. And I'm like, well, crap, why am I doing things? What is the point of doing things? If I'm not doing it for one of these negative reasons, that's kind of been a lot of my life, is that you do it. I mean, my legacy in Tau Beta Sigma, the sorority that I was in college, I did a lot of things in Tau Beta Sigma. I became our regional district president. I won the top award that you can win as a student, and it all stemmed because the my membership educator, when I was joining like 6 weeks into the process, said, "Sammy, you don't belong in TBS." And I said, "I'll show you." And got not and then won the top award in the organization 3 years later. Like, I
And she
hate to
would go, "You're welcome. Look at me. I was motivating for you."
right, and, like, I don't love that, but there are so many things that I do get really motivated when somebody says, "You can't do this," and when I that to me, I'm always like, "Yeah, but that's a positive motivation," and so it's okay to go for that, it's less okay to go to prove I'm enough. No, it's kind of all, like, that's not the way that I want to be motivated. So then when I was sharing this with Angela and being like, "Oh, I'm in a head funk, and why do you do things?" And she goes, "Ooh, that's when you start a new experiment." And I was like, it's not helpful. Stop talking cryptically. Like, what do you mean when you start a new experiment? So
So
explain
instead of
to us.
explaining to her, I said, "Well, let's do a podcast about it."
Yeah. And this conversation definitely didn't happen last night at the date of this recording. And I definitely didn't have to wait like 12 hours to get the let's talk about it. So, Angela, tell us more about setting
I
experiments.
yes, and I can't remember. Longtime listeners, feel free to tell me. Yes, you've talked about this because I really don't remember if we've started unpacking the idea of an experiment. But as I got lighter and literally unpacked the baggage from my life, I came to the same reckoning point of like, well, now what? I'm impressed it only took you a week. I mean, I think I was months of like wandering about what this was, and I had to come to a couple of things. Number one, I did want to keep growing as a human. I wanted to keep evolving as a human. I've seen enough people that are like, I'm just going to coast, and they end up devolving as a human, meaning that they become less good versions of themselves and they become not the better version of themselves from where I sit. That's not judgment, that's assessment. Yes, you guys should pick that up.
Sure.
Anyway, the it's just not how I wanted to be in the world. And so then I had to begin to go, okay, well, I want to continue to evolve. How can I do that if I'm not trying to prove something? And so the way I've started thinking about it is running an experiment. And by that, I mean, like, when you run an experiment with the scientific method, you identify the elements and the variables in your experiment and you make a hypothesis and then you run it and you see, did that work right or not? And then you run it again and until you develop a theory and then your theory can become the law, right? And so from a scientific method standpoint, I began to say, okay, I love to travel, and there are very lots of people in my life that they would put on their goal list as I want to travel more. And so over the last 3 years, I have continued to travel more and more each year
Mhm.
until the point where I this year hit a wall and I was like, I don't want to go anywhere. I want to be home.
Mm.
And I remember in March sitting there going, and I was putting my makeup on and I was literally counting the days that I had been gone in how many periods. So in a 16-week period, I had been gone and on the road for 10 weeks. Now, 4 of those weeks were for a family illness and a funeral. And am I delighted that I had the capacity and the capability to take some time out of my life and to go and be there the last few weeks that my aunt was alive. I will treasure that time for the rest of my life, even if I didn't treasure it necessarily every day that it happened. Because it was hard being in a hospital a lot for 3 weeks, that was
With
hard, but I
somebody who
was
is having
who
a
was
harder time because they are in the process of
of
dying,
leaving the earth, yeah.
which is not necessarily like a fun experience.
It's not.
So they tell me.
Yeah. Well, actually, yes, a friend of mine. Whole different thing. And so I those so there was a part of that that wasn't my choice of that, or I hadn't planned it. And then there was 5 weeks that I had planned that it was very delightful. And then there was a couple of more really cool opportunities that I got where I got to travel a little more. And I just found like this is too much. This is too much for me. And so from my perspective, I just kept running that experiment until I got to the point of saying how much is too much. And I and then now I can set kind of my standards of what I want to how I want to operate my life in the way of travel, and I can know how much or is too much and too little. Now, I may get really busy with speaking, and I will have run that experiment in a situation where there wasn't money tied to it, and now I can like protect that time and be really more intentional when my speaking career gets going and ramps up, so that I know, okay, you're going to have to be real careful about being home. And what's cool is I also, during that experiment, when I was home, I was really intentional about the people that I connected with, because that could have been a very lonely experience. But I made sure that I connect with those people. So that's what I talk about with running an experiment. I basically, Lynn, I talked a few weeks ago about my fun problem. I'm trying to run an experiment on how to move my body in more fun ways so that I can see if I can cause an impact on what my weight or my muscle tone is. I really can run an experiment on how much I can bike without practicing, So instead of it being, and this could be really helpful for people who are like, I've never been into goal setting. I don't like it. The SMART goal stresses me out. Rah, rah. The thing is that this is still a method and there is still a process that I'm going through. It is just not, is it attainable? Is it timely? Is it realistic? Is it all of those things? A- And um and it's also not the grand goals either that we talk about in Be Freaking Awesome. It's just a new way that I'm kind of thinking about it, is like what's working
That's
and
really
what's not.
interesting. And on that, I think SMART goals don't work if you're not a business. I think if you are in a business setting, SMART goals are a really great tool. And then we learn that in a business setting, in a classroom setting, and then we're like, oh, well, now I have to make my personal goals SMART goals. I call BS. That's crap, and you don't have to. And honestly, like when you we've talked about trajectory at different points in time. If you're a boat floating about the ocean and you set a trajectory, that gives you like a heading. You can start to move slowly in that direction. That heading doesn't have to be specific, time bound, measurable, realistic, and attainable.
Measure. Yeah.
Um, but it can be a general direction. I want my life to have more fun in it. I want my life to have more friend time in it. Those kinds of things are okay personal goals to have. And we've talked about when you shift the trajectory of your boat 1 degree difference. I'm not even going to go out and do big major life overhaul things. I'm just going to do 1 degree different. Over time, that 1 degree will lead to huge end result changes. If you don't really care where you end up in life, then fine, float. Your boat will go somewhere. If you just let your boat float, whatever floats your boat, um, you're going to be taken somewhere in life. You're going to end up in a place. And then there's often where people will end up in a place and they'll be like, well, I don't really know how this happened to me. And it's like, well, it happened to you because you didn't decide that you wanted to go anywhere. And then the counter argument is, well, I didn't know where I wanted to go. It's like, but you may not know where you want to go, but you probably know some characteristics either that you want or don't want. Well, I don't want to be in stormy waters all the time. Well, I don't want to feel like I'm just carrying all of this weight behind me, this baggage. I don't want whatever it might be in your life, that is still helpful to know, even if you don't have a clear vision of where you want to go. And so, as you think about goals, goals don't have to fit into any specific mold. It can be something as loose as I want to set an intention for the direction of my life. I want to be on purpose about what kinds of things I want to fill in my life. I want to want something. I'm going to decide what I want. And that doesn't have to be a fast process either. I know that I have been pressed by my business partner for it feels like a couple of years now. What do you want? We're replaying out the scene in the notebook. What do you want? I don't know. It's complicated. No, it's not. What do you want? Anyway, do you want to talk about Angela? The scene from the notebook? Maybe. Anyway,
Sure.
whatever. Um,
I was gonna give you a different movie reference. I was gonna give you Runaway Bride reference, where you may have to try 19 different kinds of eggs to figure out what kind of egg. That doesn't mean you have to figure it all out all in one day the way she did. You could literally have eggs every weekend to see what kind of eggs you want each weekend.
Right. And
And
it's
so,
okay to go about that time, taking your time to figure out what you want, because even that, deciding I'm going to figure out what I want is a decision. It
yep,
is still the pre step. I want to figure out what I want. Great.
yep.
That is a decision to be able to start you going in a direction. And so maybe this is outside of the box goals, is really
Well,
what we're
I
talking
want
about.
to related to the goal of the idea of trajectory, which I'm a giant fan for. But I just recently saw a meme on the internet. Gotta love them. That it said when it comes to time travel, think about all the movies that are time travel. We're so obsessed with if we were to do time travel and we change one little thing, we could wreck the whole future continuum. But none of us will take the small step to change something today to set the future
Wreck.
continuum where live or wreck, yeah, set the one that we are actually living in, you know and so it can be as simple as I want to speak more kindly to myself. That is a goal. I
Mhm.
literally was in I went and dug out the notebook because in 2012, I think I talked about this in the friendship episode a couple weeks ago, but in 2012 set the goal of more girlfriend time. Now there's no smart goal about that. There's no actual experiment that I was running with that, but I wanted more. And so I have over the last few years been very intentional, and I have figured out also that there are certain people in my life that I want more of them. And so I try to figure out, because they fill my cup so full of joy, that I try to figure out times that I can get together with them so that I meet that goal of like a very full and fulfilling life. There's also for me, when we think about trajectory, in 2023, I helped two different people. I was a part of the process for two different people leaving this planet. And it's interesting because after that experience, I don't talk about either of those two people dying. I often talk about those two people leaving the planet because that's literally what it felt like. Number one, they both have they share my faith perspective and don't feel like this is just a temporal body that we are in and that there's something more beyond this. So that's number one. But number two is that when you walk through that experience, it was so interesting because one funeral was like on November 11th or 12th, something in like that, November 10th, and then my aunt had her stroke like November 28th. I mean, there was not a lot of time between those two events, the end of one and then the beginning of the next one that ended pretty quickly. You get a really acute awareness of what people care about at the end of their life. And, you've heard this before, like nobody at the end of their life wishes they spent more time at the office. But when you are right in it, it really solidified for me, like the same thing that we talked about in the book from Harvard. That is like the a good life. A good life is about the relationships that we have.
Mhm.
And I I have a friend that is she's 96, she'll be 97 this year. And she and I joked a little bit because she's like, it could be that there may not be a lot of people at my funeral because I'm outliving all of my friends. She says over the last 20 years, her friends keep getting younger and younger because she's outliving everyone.
Yeah.
There's that extreme situation, but what's great is that she's also cultivated relationships in different generations. So I just want you to think about where do you want to end up. I've been asking people recently especially if they're in their 20s, I say, what do you want to thank 18-year-old you for doing? What did 18-year-old do that is now making your life easier today? And they were like, whoa. And then I said, okay, and then now, and these are early 20s that I asked this, now what is 30-year-old you going to be grateful for today? What are you going to do today that 30-year-old you is going to be really grateful? And I've been focused on this because I turned 50 last year. I just did a big victory, like I made it to 50. Woo! You know what I mean? And then I turned 51 this year and I'm like, whoa, we are suddenly closer to 60. We are to 50. I don't know what happened. It was
What?
so funny. 50 did not, I mean, I literally was just like, yeah, let's go. And then, but 51, I'm like, okay, I set the goal to be stronger at 60 than I was at 40. I set that goal when I was like 43, 44. And so now I have to think about what does that actually mean? And so I think a lot about what will 60-year-old me be thankful for today me, 51-year-old me, for doing and investing and the relationships that I made. And so for me, even all this goal setting, like if your goal setting is only business goals or financial goals or giving goals, or like stuff around your house, then you're missing the boat, because I'm going to say start with relationship goals and figure out what do you have that you want more of, and then how do you want it end when you leave this planet. If you got an opportunity to spend those last few weeks or months, what are you going to be really grateful that you did?
I also think so I love this vision setting, this future self, the different pieces like that. On the flip side, something that can help you with sort of figuring out where you wanting to go is the reflection. Where have you
Hmm.
been that you loved? Where have you been that you have not loved? What are the things that you loved to do as a kid? What are the things that
Yes.
brought you joy when you were a teenager? And there's an element that these are two different exercises. So I don't recommend like mushing them into one journal prompt. Think of them as two separate. And on this sort of thought prompt, what in the reflection of your life, assess where you've been and what you like and what you don't like. And it doesn't have to be from a place of judgment of like, oh man, I was a really awful person. No, it can be like, oh man, I noticed that the things I had going on, maybe I had a really stressful job, and that stressful job led me to not be such a good family member or not such a good friend. That's a piece of information. When I go forward to look in the future, having a job that allows me to have space to separate from my work might be really important, or whatever that might be. Because if you can see and try to notice in your experiments, what are the variables that led to an unfavorable outcome, and how can you change those? How can you maybe make it a little bit different if you're going to try again? Angela and I have been talking at different times about big revenue goals that we have for our professional development work. And one of the things that has come up is that Angela's like, I've hit these revenue goals before and my life sucked and I had no work life balance and I didn't love the person that I was. And so, if we're going to do it again, like, it's not to say that I can't hit the goal, it's to say that I want to hit the goal and have a quality life at the same time. And so, even that, it's information, it's that reflecting back and seeing what's going on. Angela, I also think just something that I'm noticing now, back in January, December and January, you would call me and be like, man, I just can't figure out why I'm not motivated to do anything right now. And why we tried to tell you a little bit in the moment, and I think that it took some
Actually,
time to
the
get
worst of
there.
that call was the day after my aunt's stroke. I remember.
Yeah. But you it makes sense that you couldn't get motivated in that moment. So I think even within all of this goal setting and all of the trajectory work, sometimes I was like, with the nuance and of course the caveat, you got to give yourself some grace that things are happening. And I think that you still showed your character, and you still like, in the way that you had built your life, you were able to respond in a way that you wanted to. You were able to show up for people. Was it great and a beautiful time and there were no tears shed? No. But in a lot of ways, you got to be more of who you're wanting to become, even though it was kind of hard along the way.
Yeah, and I remember that call because I was like, I just can't pick my head up. Like, I just want to do stuff. And you were like, you walked through this process with your friend Nathan, who was on the podcast twice. So he, had stopped cancer treatment. He got a lot better for several months, and then he declined again. And you were like, I think you might need a sabbatical. Like, I think this was harder on you than you actually realize. And so that day, we were able to kind of rearrange a few of my day to day responsibilities, shift those around. And the next morning at 8 o'clock is when I get the call that said, um, we don't know if she's going to make it through the week. And I was able to jump on a plane in 6 hours and get on a plane to get up there. And luckily she did do, bounce back, and I had several weeks with her. It's also interesting because I can reflect back in 2005, and it was in April that it was like I hit this wall, and I was like, I need to step out of the business. Now, I was bringing in 60% of the revenue. I had a very, very significant consulting gig. It took me 4 months to unwind my involvement in that consulting gig. At the end of the 4 months, I had my wisdom teeth out. While I was recovering from that, is when my uncle, who's my aunt's husband, same similar situation. His cancer flared up, and we were 3 weeks. Like, it was the exact same 3 weeks where I was able to just, because I had stepped out 4 months ago and had unwound myself, I had the capacity to go for that 3 weeks and kind of be an assistant as he left the planet. And so, but what I think your point of this is that your goal and your experiment could be, I need to rest. I can remember a
Mm-hmm.
few years ago I had to do that. I had to teach myself it's okay if after church on Sunday until 6, 7 o'clock, if all you do is lay on the couch and read a book or watch TV, that is fine. That is good. That is rest, and you need rest. So we're saying trajectory, and we're saying that, set your goal of how you want to be in the world. And one of those goals could be that the way you need to be in the world is you need to rest. You may need to recover. I feel like 2023 I was grappling with grief, and how better to grapple with grief than walk through death a couple of times with some people, right? And really, I feel like I know how to dance with grief now. It's not my favorite emotion to dance with, but that was what I needed
Mm-hmm.
during that time frame. Now, also remember, I published a book during that time, and some crazy things, but we make room for the things that we got to make room for. And or at least that's how I wanted to show up in the world. And I was very glad that I was able to do that. And for me, it was a couple of nights a week. It was a couple of hours at a time. I do not want to oversell my experience with that and make myself out to be this big martyr. It was just so impactful for me,
Mm-hmm.
and such a joy to be able to give in this way. But if rest is what you need, if overwhelm is what you're struggling with, if you are burnt out, then your experiment could be, what does it look like to rest? What does it look like to have joy? What does it look like to try to wrestle with these negative voices in my head? Okay, I hear you, Sammy and Angela. You're saying that you don't. hear the I'm not enough. What the heck is this life that you're living that you don't wrestle with that? And maybe it's like, oh, you know what? I picked up Angela's book last year. I maybe perused through it. I didn't actually realize that you could maybe wrestle with the voice that I'm not good enough. And if you're like I'm not a reader, well great, it's on Audible now. And maybe your goal is to like go slow and go through those beliefs and start to catalog. Maybe your experiment you need to run is to get to know yourself
Mhm.
and just even be willing to listen, get back into your body. The goal doesn't have to be this new higher revenue, this new higher we're going to weight loss, this new higher thing. The trajectory can be also a season of pause, a season of rest. It could be a season of, you know what, it is starting the crazy fall season where my kids are like in football and band and soccer and everything. And a season of rest would be amazing. I can remember looking at Barry one year that we had an exchange student that was in traveling soccer, a senior or a junior in high school, and a so Lexi would have been in ninth grade, and all three of them were on three different traveling soccer teams. And I just looked at Barry and I went, "We are going to enjoy this. It's going to suck for about 3.5 months, but just take a deep breath. Everybody make sure you keep your arms and legs inside
Inside
the
the
car
vehicle.
at all times because we're about to get on a roller coaster." And we just went for it, and we actually just settled in and said, this is not the season I'm going to go to coffee with friends. This is not the season that I'm going to be available. There was even another season where that friend that's now 94, I had to go to her and be like, can you please take Lexi to soccer? I can't manage this. And so that if that's your season, that's okay. And decide, you know what I'm going to do during this season when I'm in the car with my kids, I'm not going to be on my phone. I'm going to make sure that the time that we have in transit, I'm talking to them. And I'm going to see about and really be really intentional, because maybe the time you have with your kids may just be that car time. That could be your trajectory for this fall time. I don't know what it is, but decide and be
And
intentional.
And I think that it's deciding who and how you want to be.
Yep.
It can be what do you want to do, but it can also be who do you want to be and how do you want to be. I want to be somebody who's known for being calm. So, what are the ways that you can set that trajectory for your life? It's not just girl bossing and, climbing the ladder and doing all these things. It is really about deciding a way that you want to be, because you're going to be some way. You
Yep.
are going to be someone, and you're going to live a life in some way. The how it will be there. And
Mhm.
if you don't decide it, it will just happen. So why not decide? Why not make some intentions and some goals and some trajectory shifts for your life?
Well, and just one more thing is that I also want to speak to the people that they are the direct caregiver. I got to be a subsidiary caregiver, and those direct caregivers, it's okay to just coast for this season. If
Hmm.
you are taking care of an aging parent, if you're taking care of someone, it's also okay to run the experiment. What will it be like to coast for this next 4 to 6 months or years? You know what I mean? And I would hope you don't coast for 4 to 6 years, but that you would begin to carve out, like, what time can I take care of myself? What does that look like? How can I feed myself in this process? But we see you. We see all the places and all the people that listen here, and we love you guys a whole bunch.
Yeah, caregivers for both the elderly and the littly. It's the opposite.
Hmm.
The toddlers, the people when you're really having to care for that other person. It's a lot for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for joining, letting us just get on our soapbox about why you should set goals. If any of these exercises resonate with you, or you have the chance to do them and want to share some of your results, let us know. We'd be delighted to hear from you and delighted to share in the joys and the challenges with you. So, thank you everybody for listening. Go subscribe to our newsletter on our website. And for now, I hope you guys go be freaking awesome.